Thank you for joining us for another edition of ALN Thursday at 3. And we are talking today with Cyril Verley. And Cyril has been a guest with us in the past. He's president and CEO of Systems, CDV Systems, and he is co-founder of the 26 degrees, different variation of his software approach to solving owners' problems with information, specifically data handover and ongoing exchange. So he works perfectly into what we're talking about, and we'll get into the asset leadership standard that we're going to be developing with Cyril and others. We're inviting everyone on data structure. And first, we'd like to thank our patron members, Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, and CGI, and all of our members. And we're having a lot of fun working on projects with our members now. We're moving into a pilot project stage. And we'll be talking about how one of those pilot projects is kind of integral to what we're going to be talking about regarding the standard for information structure. So Cyril,
Sir,
you can
should
join
I?
your camera can, yeah.
Okay,
So we've identified in the past that there is a big problem, and its owners are not requiring information in a way that they can use in an ongoing manner. And
correct.
the ALN has determined that this improper approach to data for their assets and their facility, the facility is an asset, it's all the same. Asset data is not being required properly. And in some cases, when it is being required properly, it's not being enforced. And so owners don't get the data they need right when they need it at the start of a new building or at the start of a new project. This is repeated. This is throughout the world. This Cyril's has an incredible client list. Cyril, will you just? I love seeing your
Gosh,
client list. If you could show that, that would be great.
absolutely. Can you see my screen?
It is starting to share now,
Great.
and he's got well-known owners, well-known architects, well-known engineers, well-known contractors, all types of building industry owners of assets and managers of information. So what Cyril is saying comes with excellent pedigree and incredible use and application. And the information structure standard that we're going to create is a leadership standard that are the steps that owners need to require their architects, engineers, and contractors to put their data into and have it be formatted in a way that it can be used all the way to the disposal of a building or a piece of equipment. They know how much copper is in there. They can calculate what type of ROI they might get on demolition. Okay, so thank you for sharing this slide. What you have said over and over is that there is a path to having proper data structure. And you don't need to share your slides anymore because we're going to talk about the concept here. And the concept is that owners need to require this information. Now, you've worked with owners who have worked with you and have therefore learned from you and established their data structure in a format that makes it the data usable.
Correct. Correct. So what we found is that there's three legs of this chair that provides owners with models that are useful at handover. One is we have to define the structure, BIM execution plan. but with the data structure behind it. Number two, to provide that infrastructure to the teams, AEC teams, in order to create models that are data rich. And the third leg is for the owner to be able to validate those models without being BIM experts, so that from pre-design to handover, all through time, the owner has the ability of checking the models to make sure, is the data there? Has the information been filled in? Because at handover, it's too late. Oftentimes people get models, owners get models at handover, and at that point it's too late to check them at all. In this workflow, we've created a structure that allows the owners to check the models at SD, DD, 10% CDs, 50% CDs, whatever the delivery dates are. They have the ability of checking the models to make sure that they are data rich without being BIM experts. That's the key. So define, provide, and validate.
Excellent. So the validation part is very interesting because the Asset Leadership Standards Committee of the Linux Foundation's Coalition for Smarter Buildings has a international base. And so we have meetings on every other Tuesday at noon Eastern and then 9 p.m. Eastern. So people on the other side of the world can keep in touch and inform us of what they think is important. And our Australian colleagues from the Asset Management Council thinks that this data structure standard is ideal. And when talking about this validation that you're talking about, they said that usually it's in the last 1%. Did you get the information to us? And
Right.
that's not a big enough carrot to that I call it a carrot that's as big as a stick is what you really want. And that's not a big enough stick to get people to actually get the data right.
Right.
So there's been recommendation that in contracting, there be a clause that says, and if you don't get us the data properly, it's going to cost us X $100,000. It comes out of your contract.
Yeah. No, I think that's, I mean, we've got a client right now in the upper Midwest, and the client is holding the AEC team members to the fire. They've delivered models that were not data rich, not per the requirements of the BIM execution plan that they signed as a contract, and they're being held to the fire of providing models because this owner wants to be able to, jump to harvest this data into their operation structure, whatever that is, doesn't matter. We're agnostic to that, from day one, right from not waiting 6 to 18 months to recreate a data structure that allows them to operate the building. They're
This
literally
is the
in
crisis.
weeks. Yeah,
This is
that's
the
the
crisis.
crisis. Right.
And it
Yep.
also is for existing buildings because there's even more existing buildings. Does
Right.
this data structure work for existing buildings?
It does. What we found is we've that we've partnered with a variety of digital twins. One in particular is Onuma System, and in the project we've done with Onuma, the data structure that exists in BIM is the same data structure in Onuma. So if let's say someone's doing a facility condition assessment and they're walking through the building, they're not holding an Excel file. They're holding an iPad with a floor plan of the building. They can see the rooms, they can see the list of assets. And if that's a legacy building, the data structure is already in place. They're simply filling in the values that are required by the facility condition assessor or a custodial person or a technician that wants to replace a piece of equipment. The data structure is already built inside the digital twin. So it's a data flow from pre-design through construction, through design, construction, CA, right into operations. It's the same kind of data structure. And it includes all stakeholders within the institution. So it's asset management, of course, that's critical, but it's also space planning, capital planning, custodial, real estate, all the different departments within an institution that want to benefit from that data structure. So it's an all-inclusive, deliberately an all-inclusive data structure.
So what does this data structure look like?
Let's have a gander. So there are, again, as I mentioned, there are three parts to the structure. We're going to focus on Um, the first two. Let me just see if I can get my screen to work. There we go. Well, just as an FYI, you know, Clive Jordan from Plannerly recently posted in a lecture that he did that 90% of AEC data is unstructured. We know that. We've known that for about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. We've realized, even though we've built standards for these amazing firms, when the models are delivered to the owners, and this was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we realized there was no data structure behind it. And then this other tidbit, 96% of AEC data is unused. We know that well as well. It's precisely because the data is unstructured. So just mentioning those two things. Let me just kick out of this real quick because I want to just go right into um, just as a glance of what typically happens in the industry right now, when AEC firms produce models, each has their own BIM standard. So the architects have their own BIM standard, the interior designers have their own BIM standard, the engineers, the contractors, they all have their own BIM standards. When they're delivered to the owner, then the owners have their own standards themselves. I mean, one of our clients recently told us, we let the architects give us the BIM standards that they're using. And that to me is just is nails across a blackboard. Then within institutions, each of these different stakeholders, if you will, have their own standards. Whether it's, asset standards, space standards between planning and operations and custodial, they all have their own standards. So from our perspective, the owner needs to create and establish their own data standard that incorporates all of those different stakeholders, including the AEC team members, and that synchronizes across many applications. So our perspective is think of data standards as the bookends for all the different stakeholders within an institution. So we're first going to begin with a BIM execution plan that includes data. If it doesn't have data standard behind it, it's not going to work. And there's dozens of BIM execution plans that we've seen in the past that fail because they're not defining a data standard. So here, if I open up a BIMX plan, here's an image of our BIMX plan from Collectus. And there's a set of asset types that the owner wants to maintain. And within those asset types, we've established a required standard. So literally, these are the values that we want you to have inside the BIM model. We're defining it in the BIM execution plan. Air handling units have manufacturing information and operations and maintenance information. By the way, we call this LODI, level of data information. LODI 300 is for the architects and engineers to fill that information. LODI 400 is manufacturing information for the contractors and subcontractors, the installers, if you will, to fill in. And LODI 500 is operations and maintenance data. So here's a glimpse of parameters that are required for air handling units. Likewise, there are parameters for rooms. And again, these are not outrageous values. These are values that every contractor and subcontractor and AE ideally want to provide, but unfortunately, they're not putting it into the model. So we're specifying these are to be placed into the model.
Okay, so what we're recommending is the owners establish what they want. Now they could follow your pattern if they want to. They can
Of
make their
course,
own. They can go to
absolutely.
another. Right. Okay.
Exactly right. And keep in mind that this owner data standard wants to include, the stakeholders within its institution. So conversations between asset management, capital planning, real estate, facility management, all these different stakeholders they have their own silos of data. We want to consolidate that, but then be able to pass that across all the different systems. So the BIM execution plan, there's another aspect of this data standard. It's the naming convention for assets. So like the naming convention for rooms, that's part of the BIMX plan too, but we're not going to get into that. We're talking about assets here. So in terms of assets, an ideal data structure that exists in the industry is called master format. Any architect you talk to understands master format. They understand that division 3 is concrete. So what we're defining here is that whatever assets placed into the model has a prefix naming convention representing the master format value. This way, as you go from one firm to the next, they're not, every AE firm has their own mechanism of naming standards. Now this is the client's BIM standard of content. So you're looking at Collectus here. This is our library of 36,000 components integrated with our BIMX plan that includes and establishes a standard on how to name doors, windows, you know, grab bars, whatever it is. And as we go through all the different divisions within the standard, division 22 is plumbing. All of these have their categories. Keep in mind, when the spec writers are specing the building, they're doing the specifications. They're using these same master format standards. That's how they write their specs. So again, it just goes right along with the industry standard. In this case, we know there are certain individuals within an institution that want to know where things like a fuel tank is in the building, and if there's time, we'll talk about why that's important for the owner to protect the people in the building. Or in another case too, this piece of equipment, which is a air handling unit, this you're going to see a glimpse of having this structure pass through BIM execution plan into the models, into operations. So I'll stop here. I mean, the next portion is actually getting into omni-class and uniformat. So in addition to master format, owners at different times may need, and this is going right along with what's going on with the C4SB and the PAE project that's with the ALN, to establish a structure of how to get BIM data into operations. Uniformat and OmniClass are part of that. So in this structure, these components that have a master format structure, again, within Collectus, this is just an example of a workflow that we have. This is our Collectus structure. We have a connection or a partnership with the CSI, the Construction Specification Institute. We've installed through APIs their application inside Collectus, which recognizes the master format naming convention for the components and immediately applies the most current master format, uniformat, and OmniClass values and pushes those directly into the model. So again, we want to keep the model data rich. There's an understanding of these components initially, and now as they're used, OmniClass, master format, and uniformat can be applied to these components literally as a two-button process. Again, the models stay where they are. We don't require that models be placed in certain folders or the models are in the separate AE silos, but this handshake allows this translation to happen literally in seconds. And then the BIM structure itself. So if I take a glance at a piece of equipment inside a model, here's a Collectus tower we did with a Numa system. And if I look at a particular unit and a particular piece of equipment, this air handling unit, the air handling unit first has the naming convention that's coming out of the same master format structure. So there's the component right there. And within that component, it has the parameter structure that matches exactly what the BIM execution plan parameter structure has. So the user knows this is the data they have to fill in, as per the requirements in the model itself. Likewise, for all of the operations and maintenance data, the data structure is already there. They simply have to fill it in, and it matches perfectly with what's in the BIM execution plan. And then it goes into a digital twin. So should I stop here for a moment, Mike, and let we can have a conversation?
Yes, let's focus on the structure part.
Okay, great.
And
I'll stop sharing.
When it is structured, then it can be used in operations. Then
Correct.
it is readily available.
Correct. And we like to say the word harvested. We are the first to suggest we don't want an owner to try to use BIM to manage the facility. BIM is not designed for that. But to harvest a data-rich BIM, that's the key. People can send models out to Excel anytime they want, but the moment you've done that, you've disconnected the model and that data. And if the model changes, which the model changes all the time, you have to resubmit that Excel file. From our experience, if the data structure is there, the users can place the components and they can make their own if they want as well. They're not opposed to doing that, and they have templates for that. Again, the owner can check the models to make sure, are these schedules filled in representing the data structure that's required, so at handover the models are data rich. And whatever they want to do with them at that point, that's up to them. However they want to harvest the data.
But we're going to have suggestions through the PAE pilot project that will demonstrate ways that owners will want to use the data. And
Absolutely.
one of the things that's part of the crisis that the ALN is yelling from the top of the mountains is that information should be available to first responders so that they reduce their risk while they're trying to save our lives.
Right.
And it's not legal right now, or it's not a legal requirement, but we're going to suggest to our legislators language that would make it legal, a legal requirement. But we feel it is a moral and social obligation that if you know where that fuel tank is, you damn well better tell a firefighter who's going into your building that it's there, and not letting somebody who is risking their life to save your people, your property. It's just morally reprehensible. And
Absolutely.
it is possible, and owners need to make that available.
Right.
And that's part of the crisis. And we're screaming from the top of the mountains about it. And thank you, Cyril, for being interested in joining us and amplifying the voice of owners need to structure their data. It's a moral responsibility when you take it down. But there's tons of benefits, and that's what the PAE pilot project is showing, is how you can better understand your energy use. You can, if you're generating energy through solar or wind, other alternative energy sources, you can then calculate when to sell it to the grid at the best price for yourself. Just a laundry list of benefits.
In my mind, for me, the key benefit is obviously, you want to protect life and property, but the key benefit is that if you can't locate an asset in a building, you can't maintain it. That's the problem. And is that this data structure provides a mechanism to actually locate the assets with data on top of that on a map, so that whomever needs to find it can find it using a map. And ideally, the digital twin has a map-based structure. That's the ideal digital twin. It's not an Excel file or a pie chart. It's a map with the data.
You wouldn't give a firefighter a
An
pie
Excel
chart.
file.
Yeah, or an Excel file, right.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
um, the social and moral issues that we're calling up now, I think, are because humanity has evolved their tools so dramatically that this information is now available. And if Uber can map out where a car is and where you are, we can do the same thing with fire
Absolutely.
and give that information, because we're connecting sensors and occupancy sensors and temperature readings so that first responders have that information.
Right.
And we have
And
had,
they're on their phone.
right, right.
Yeah, on their phone.
So we're moving into establishing that standard, and then we're going to be, like I said, suggesting to legislators to include language about using um, secure, open source software connections, because that's the key part, and open business process management standards, which is what we're going to be writing about the data structure. Now,
Right.
we'll be doing others, but we're starting with the data structure because we think that's the clearest, quickest thing to point out to owners that they need to do to gain many benefits.
Right. It's interesting how the codes are written, the ADA codes are written to allow anyone into a building, but in an emergency, people need to be able to get out of the building. And one would think that part of the legislation that's written is that that owners need to be required to provide mechanisms, assets within the building that allow them to get out of the building. Because if a building's on fire, everyone's handicapped. You know, they're all at risk of getting hurt. So again,
They could be visually impaired from smoke.
exactly, of
They could be
course,
mentally impaired from the crisis situation.
absolutely,
And panic is a disability. So
sure,
um, yeah, we're really leaning on that. And we do have
exactly.
a carrot that's as big as the stick in that the standard of care has improved because the tools and processes have improved.
Right.
And whether or not everyone is doing things the way Cyril just described doesn't matter. It's possible now, and now owners could be held responsible for not implementing the standard of care that's available today.
Actually, that brings up an interesting point. Kimon and I were lecturing at the ASHRAE conference in 2025. This was a few months ago. And I happened to walk in with my partner. We walked into a conference about, this was a retired Marine, and he was describing the needs of having owners prepare for, God forbid, shooters, active shooters. And he showed a list of CEOs that went to jail. There's about a half a dozen every year that go to jail because those folks didn't implement a kind of a program to protect their occupants from that kind of scenario. So again, it's another level of, I mean, it was interesting when this guy spoke. He was very Marine, great guy, very informative, but holy cow, I had no idea that people went to jail. CEOs, these are CEOs now going to jail for not having these preparations in place for these kind of emergency.
And we understand that those types of lawsuits are possible. We would prefer to not do lawsuits. We would prefer to provide education to owners.
Right.
And that's why Cyril is generously contributing to establishment of a data structure standard that people can follow. This is work that he's figured out over 20, 30, his entire career. And he's making this available in a repeatable standard. So thank you for your involvement on that level. We invite others to join in and help us write the standard in a clear, simple, straightforward way so that owners, this is not for management, this is for owners to say, okay, everybody, I am bought into this. Start structuring the data in this manner.
Exactly. No, it's exactly. And Mike, thank you for allowing it to be the what's the blowhorn for this,
The
because
megaphone.
the megaphone. I know it's passionate for you as well. That
Yes. Well,
these.
our members allow us to pursue these types of goals, and thank you for your membership and uh, your active support. So with that, I think if you have any closing comments, otherwise we can just say thanks to the audience.
Thank you, Mike. This has been great.
All right, bye, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks again.
See you next week. Thank you, Mike.